Also, to just thank the organizers of this event. I do think it's an excellent initiative when we not only pray, but we also take steps. Because sometimes the difference between the prayers and the answer to those prayers is knowledge. So I'll be speaking to you about the new tax reforms and what you need to do about them. I don't know whether, yes. So let's go back a little bit. Okay. So first, the outline that I want to discuss with you, and I hope you have your notes and pen, because you need to take note of so many things. It will make a world of difference for you. I'll start by giving an overview, and then I'll highlight some key changes in the new reforms and tell you the implications for you as an individual, you as a business owner, you as an employee, you as an employer, and even if you are here as a civil servant. And then, what do we do about all of that? The starting point for me is always to give context. And the first message is a proverbial blind man and an elephant. So these blind men, not knowing what was in front of them, had to move close and feel it so they could describe what they thought the object was. Depending on the side of the elephant that they touched, they concluded what it was. From thinking it might be a fan, to a wall, or even a tree or rope, maybe a snake or a spear. It turns out none of them got the right answer because none of them felt the big picture. One thing I can tell you is that the tax reforms enacted into law a few months ago that will take effect from January next year is the most transformative, most significant in our nation's history. So it hasn't happened before. And therefore, with over 200 significant changes, more than 400 pages combined, it is very easy and could be tempting to narrow it down to one issue. It will be making the same mistake as the blind man and the elephant. So, what if we answer the question, why all of this in the first place? Why are you fixing it if it's not broken? Actually, it was totally broken. We needed to fix it. If the global tax system were to be different cars wanting to get into a race, this is how the picture would look like. You see that Volkswagen B2? Down to the left, that would be Nigeria. Even within Africa, some of the leading countries like South Africa, like Rwanda, imagine calling Rwanda as the leading countries in Africa in terms of their tax system, will be the more modern car in the middle. And the most developed across the world, mostly the OECD countries, will be that Tesla Cybertruck. You will agree with me, no matter how experienced, how hardworking, or maybe even prayerful the driver of the B2 car is, he's very unlikely to win this race. The problem is not necessarily the driver. The problem is the car. And the solution to this problem is not to find a better engine for that car or to replace the tires or to repaint it. It is to get rid of it and get a modern car. That was why we repealed so many old laws and enacted new ones, and there are 4 of them. So now we have the chance to compete in a world that is very dynamic and changing every day. Sometimes in the world we live today, you have to keep running just to stand still because others might be running faster than you. Just to highlight some of the things that are wrong with the current system or the old system, the system is unconducive for growth. You're doing business and life is difficult. In fact, I said before that you could carry out a social experiment. Do a banner and just pretend that you want to do a business. Think about any business. Put it by the roadside. Go back about 2 meters, find a chair and sit down and see what happens. Within 2 days, many agencies will show up. They will tell you registration permits, advertisement permits. Have you registered for this? Radio levy, TV levy. Nobody is asking you whether you found a customer. The first thing is taxes, taxes, and more taxes. We succeed in that by killing businesses before they have been burned. We can't grow like that. We have a system of multiple taxes, multiple agencies trying to collect those taxes. We have one of the highest burden on businesses in terms of their corporate tax. We rank in the top 10 highest in the world. We tax poverty. Like, it's counterintuitive that you can tax poverty and become a rich country. Doesn't work like that. We tax capital, people who are trying to invest. We tax investments even before they had made profits. And we do all of these using very archaic laws, many of them inherited from our colonial masters before 1960. So you'd agree with me that it was time, in fact, overdue, for us to reset the tax system if it must work for us. Now, part of the context before I go into details is also something that I hear always. You know, one thing I always promise people that I'll promise you today is I would always be honest with you. Whether you now like the outcome or not is a different thing, but I'll be honest with you. And I'm not here to promote anyone, not even the government. I'm speaking to facts and you make your own decisions. Many people would ask today, and I saw it during the recent MBA conference in Enugu. They will say, is your life better today than it was 2 years ago? Of course, the answer would be a resounding no. But the problem is not with the answer, the problem is with the question. The question presupposes that if we did nothing and maintained the status quo as it was as of May 2023, that our life today will be exactly the same as it was 2 years ago. And a liter of petrol will be the same amount. A bag of rice will be the same amount. Exchange rate of dollars will be the same amount. Guess what? That is the biggest fallacy. If government had not introduced the reforms that they introduced in the past 2 years, the picture will look like what you have on the screen. As at May 2023, I tried to use traffic colors. Nigeria was amber, waiting to turn red. You know, amber can turn to green, but this was amber turning red. It got so bad that Nigeria was trading a negative balance of payments. We're receiving less dollars than we're spending. Nigeria had printed about 30 trillion naira to spend, just printing money to spend. That's part of the inflation we are dealing with today. Because government ran out of revenue. We spent 97% of federal government revenue to service debts, which meant everything else we did, from paying salaries to overhead to capital, we borrowed. We didn't borrow at lower digit interest rates. They were high 20s. The NNPC was supposed to be remitting money to the federation account. NNPC said the government was owing them money. How? Because all of our entitlements, NNPC used it to subsidize PMS. It wasn't enough. They went to all the oil companies that were supposed to pay royalty, lifted the oil for royalty, sold it, used it to subsidize PMS. It wasn't enough. The taxes that they were supposed to pay, petroleum profit tax, they said to FRS, we won't be able to pay you. They added it to subsidy. It still wasn't enough. When they ran out of options, guess what they did? They said, how about future production of crude oil? NNPC began, and this is not Africa magic, I'm telling you real life. They began to use future production of crude oil as guarantee security to borrow dollars at double-digit interest rate to subsidize current consumption of PMS. They did it so much so that today that I speak to you, we can barely boast of equivalent of 200,000 barrels per day that is unencumbered for Nigeria. That 200,000 barrels that was left, in my estimation, was less than 6 months of headroom. If these reform had not been done by May, by the end of 2023, you know what will happen naturally? Once you exhaust your future production and you can't print dollars, you will not be able to bring in any refined products. This is a situation like what happened in Sri Lanka. You hold 10,000 naira, you pray to God to find 1 liter of petrol to buy. There will be no Dangote refinery because there's no way that business will survive if you have to sell at 160, 180, 200 and go and pray to God for government to pay you subsidy that they had no money to pay. The economy was grinding to a halt and it was very close. The margin of safety was very thin, this thin. So those reforms took us up, if you look at the screen, to 2 years later, which is 2025. But it's harder times than it was in 2023, but it's harder times before things get better. If we had not done the reforms, it would have been still now hardest times and economic collapse. So anytime you have that conversation with anyone, because it's important that you are well informed, so that even when you want to get angry, you apply your energy properly. Okay, so one of my prayers is, I hope nobody will say to us, they want to return subsidy so they can win election. Anything that returns subsidy is taking us back to the evil days. So the reforms, how are we going about them? I know many people will say this government is looking for revenue. They'll say Tinubu and tax. I had a session with some journalists about 2 weeks ago and I challenged them. I said, tell me one tax, just one tax that this president had introduced on the masses. And I'm putting that question to you in case anybody can come up with the answer. It is very easy for people, because they hear tax reform many times, to just conclude that the reform is about imposing taxes on them. I can tell you that the very first statement of the president during inauguration, that his first speech, it talked about addressing multiplicity of taxes. The very first set of executive orders that the president signed in July 2023 were 4 executive orders suspending different taxes that had been introduced by the former president towards the tail end of that last administration. He suspended them. They didn't even take effect. There were taxes including tax on single-use plastic, plastic bag, imported vehicle, 2,000 cc and above, all manners of ridiculous taxes that were suspended. Between then and now, I can give you a long list of other taxes that had been suspended by this government. And this government had not introduced one tax on the masses. But it's very easy to fall for the narrative, right? But I encourage people to speak to data. So in setting up our committee that work on this reform, we're given very clear mandates. Number 1 focus is people. Number 2 focus is growth. Number 3 focus is efficiency. You won't see revenue there. Because we know very well that to get revenue from taxes, you can't place the cart before the horse. Taxes are the consequences of economic activities. If you want taxes, promote and stimulate economic activities and taxes will come. If I'm unemployed, it doesn't matter how solid your tax laws are. It's meaningless how effective your tax authorities are. They cannot collect personal income tax from me. The conversation they should have with me is, how do you get employment? Or how do you become an employer? And then we can talk about what taxes you need to pay. So this is the way these reforms have been developed. We have done quite a lot, and we still have a lot to do. For example, beginning of this year, 1st of January, we issued a withholding tax regulation that says small businesses don't have to do withholding tax. Manufacturers, agri businesses, no withholding tax. Even services where they have to do withholding tax, we've reduced the rate. By the way, if you're wondering what withholding tax is, when you do business and you issue an invoice for your customers to pay you, the law says your customer should pay you less a certain percentage that is called withholding tax. That percentage can be 5, it can be 10, sometimes it's even more than 10. And that amount is given to the government in advance of when you need to pay your taxes. And we thought that wasn't making a lot of sense in a country where borrowing cost is very high. Why should a business borrow at 30%, 35%, and you tie it down with government? Instead of allowing them to use that money to grow their business more so they can employ more people and make profit. That we already delivered at the beginning of the year. One of the reasons why I made the remark at the beginning that knowledge is important, I can tell you today, there are thousands, if not millions of people that we have exempted from that withholding tax that are still doing it because they are not even aware. And they will not be aware because when they see the opportunity for knowledge, I don't think Nigerians are the number one people who will jump at learning. The rate and speed at which misinformation spread compared to right information is unimaginable. So I'm glad that we have you in the room today and for those who have joined us online. There are things we have done, like I said, we are harmonizing taxes and levies so they are not too many. We are also trying to, as much as possible, eliminate taxes on capital and investment. We are creating an incentive scheme that is objective and transparent. You don't need to know anyone. You only need to look into the tax laws and see whether you are eligible and you can get your tax incentive. So all of those details are in the new tax laws. So I'll speak now briefly to some of the issues that have been trending. Most of it well misunderstood. I like this quotation by Harlan Ellison. He says, "You are not entitled to your opinion. You are entitled to your informed opinion because no one is entitled to being ignorant." So I cannot just come into this hall and say tomorrow the sun will fall down and burn Nigeria into ashes, right? On what basis? You can't just say anything just because you feel like saying it. It has to be driven by knowledge. So, the first one is personal income tax. Under the new tax law, we have done different things. One, low income earners will be totally exempted from PAYE. Payee, some people call it payees. That means on a monthly basis, they will receive their salary without paying any taxes. Above that level, by the way, the threshold we have covers more than 30%, about 1/3 of all workers in the public and private sector. That's a lot of our citizens who struggle day and night just to make ends meet. It doesn't make sense for them to be the one financing government. You cannot give what you don't have. Our aspiration and hope for our country is that we get to a point where those people get additional credit on a monthly basis in their bank account so they can feed their families and have a roof over their head. They're not asking for luxury. Above that threshold, we have the middle class. You may have listened to many analysts and economists say there's no middle class in Nigeria. Again, that's an exaggeration. If you say the middle class has shrunk, you'll be right. If you say there's no middle class, you'll be wrong because there is middle class. What does it even mean to be middle class? You're middle class if you have more than enough to meet your basic needs. Anytime you travel abroad on vacation, know that you are middle class. When you buy an expensive phone, smartphone, know you are middle class. You buy a brand new car or even a used car, you're middle class. More than basics. So anyway, for that middle class, we are reducing their tax liability on a monthly basis. So if you're in that range is somewhere between over 120,000 per month to around 1.8 million naira per month. You'll see your PAYE come down because we also want you to have a bit more purchasing power. If you are high net worth individual and high income earner, you will now pay a little bit more. And someone said to me that life is hard for everyone. I said yes, but it's harder for some than the others. I'm also in that class and I will pay more. So the maximum rate you would pay on your income if you earn ₦1 billion every month before was 19%. Under the new law, it could go up to 25%. But the people that have to pay that more, guess what? They're less than 3% of the population. So they are our own high net worth individuals. Then value added tax. We are reducing the income tax rate on one hand, so people have more take-home pay. On the other hand, we are reducing the costs of basic consumption. What are the basic consumption? Number one is food. by a mile. Food. In Nigeria today, many food items are classified as exempts from VAT. Just pay attention to my explanation. So they say food is exempt. Under our new law, food is zero rated. And many people say, these people are not honest. What's the difference? Something was exempt before, they say it's zero rated. They were abusing us. Personally, I don't care when they abuse us. I take it as an opportunity to explain again. Let me explain it to you. If a bottle of water is exempt from VAT, it means that when you are selling that water, do not charge VAT. Nonetheless, you that you are the producer of the water, bottled water for example, you have so many things you paid for. You paid for the factory to refine the water. You pay for the plastic to package the water, the label on it, the cover, the vehicle to distribute the water. You have a laptop somewhere or maybe a phone. You buy airtime on the phone. The phone itself carries VAT. You've spent all manners of VAT just to produce the water. When water is exempt, you don't charge VAT on the water. But any VAT you have incurred, it's your business to deal with it. But guess what? Businesses do unto people as we do to those businesses. If you tell the business the VAT is your problem, what would you do? You do your calculation of the cost of producing the water, including VAT costs, before you charge it for sale. You add your margin and sell it. The person buying it does not see VAT, but there is hidden VAT. What we have done now is we've turned it to zero rates. What's the difference? When you are selling the water, charge VAT at 0%, which is still no VAT. But any VAT you have incurred in producing the water, government will refund it to you. This is a world of difference. Okay? So this explanation I just gave you now applies to even bread. The person selling bread has a bakery. They pay a lot of VAT. Before now, they could not claim their VAT back. Under the new regime, they'll get their VAT refunded. It also applies to education. It applies to health. And then for transportation and accommodation, they are exempt. I'll repeat that. Food, zero rates. Education, zero rates. Healthcare, zero rates. If you run a school here, it means that from now on, not now, from January 2026, keep record when you buy things. Anything you buy and you see VAT on it, keep it in a separate file. End of the month, add it together, government will give you the money back. If you are not aware, you still be running your school and be struggling. The other person that has the knowledge is making more money than you. This is where knowledge comes in. Food, zero rates. Health, zero rates. Education, zero rates. Transport and accommodation, exempt. So the idea here is enhance the earnings of the people and reduce the cost of their basic consumption. The combined impact will make the life a little bit easier. We're not saying it to solve all the problems, but it's the beginning of the journey that we have ahead of us. For businesses generally, you're a manufacturer, you're a service provider. Many people in this room, for example, provide services. If you're a consulting firm, you own a consulting firm. Before now in Nigeria, you never got input, because our law says input VAT on your assets and input VAT on your services is not claimable. The new law says no. It's not the problem of the person. It's just businesses are just vehicles for getting things done. You shouldn't penalize that vehicle. So if you run a manufacturing business now and you buy whatever it is that you buy, even if you render services and just buy a laptop or a mobile phone, just look for the VAT on the invoice. Government will give you back. But you must keep record, because it's not like you just come and they say take your money. Under the new law, we've provided for it to be paid within 30 days. No questions asked. But we also know that some people will take advantage of this. There's a provision there that if you misrepresent or falsify record to get that VAT refund or claim, you pay penalty of 200% of the amount of the claim. Because we also need our people to be responsible. If you read the tax laws, these old tax laws, they were drafted on the basis that people are dishonest and we must punish them in advance before we find out whether they are honest. This new tax law says, let's give them the benefit of the doubt that they will do the right thing. And when we find out those who do the wrong thing, they will face the consequences. That's much better in terms of how government should deal with its citizens. We have tax harmonization, where we are trying to get rid of nuisance taxes. You'll be surprised that inside our constitution, we have taxes like wheelbarrow tax, bicycle tax, produce tax, TV levy, radio levy. Who does that? Wheelbarrow. Like, how much can somebody earn pushing wheelbarrow? Like, if you are busy 24 hours and you are unable to sleep, you are still a poor person. Somebody is roasting corn by the roadside. If you have customer from when you come in the morning till you close in the evening, you are still poor. We are taxing them, taxing poverty. And you'll be amazed, the rate of tax that these people pay sometimes is more than those of us that work in the organized private sector. Every day 400 naira, 700 naira, it adds up. And they barely have 1,000 left at the end of the day to take back home. We have been unfair to our people, and it's time to fix it. That problem is not entirely fixed yet. As you know, if something is in the constitution, you can't enact a law to say you can't collect it. So what we've done is the ones that are not in the constitution, we've consolidated them, repealed many of them, and harmonized them to a few. The ones in the constitution, we are working with the sub-national, the governors and the local government to say, we believe that if the law says, the constitution says you have the powers to collect a tax, you have an implied power not to collect it. Like, if one local government says we are not collecting wheelbarrow tax, like, nobody will take them to court and say you have not collected for this year. We know that will not be persuasive enough for all of them. We have sent a request for amendment to the Constitution to the National Assembly. We know that one too is not a piece of cake, but we are following up. We are also praying as well that these things will come to fruition. Another area that has been misunderstood is the need for tax ID. Some people wrote some narrative and say, oh, from January they'll block your account, they'll do this and do that. Let me tell you what it is. In 2019, the government enacted the Finance Act of 2020. It took effect from 13th of January 2020. This is over 5 years already. And that law says, if you have a bank account that you use for business, you must produce tax identification number. Otherwise, you will not be able to continue to operate the account. From that day, 13th of January 2020, if you want to open a new account, and that new account is for business purposes, you must present a tax identification number. Otherwise, you will not be able to open the account. So, this is more than 5 years ago. People who operate account for business purposes, they already have provided their TIN and they are not even complaining. Because normally that's something you should do without anybody telling you. What we have now done under the new law is that FRS has TIN. TIN is tax identification number. If you live in Lagos State, LRS, that's the Lagos State Internal Revenue Service, they have their own TIN. Me now, I live in Lagos, I have LRS TIN. I'm also in Abuja. Joint Tax Board also gave me TIN. We now say, what kind of confusion is that? Why am I being identified like 3 persons within the same system? If you go to many countries, you just have your social security number, and that's what they use for everything. Many of us who live in Lagos, for example, sometimes you want to go and buy a plot of land in your village or in the capital city of your home state, and they'll say you have not paid tax there. They will force you to pay and give you their own TCC so you can buy. That's actually against the law. Once you pay your tax where you're resident, it carries you everywhere. So what did we do? We said, first and foremost, let's discard with this name tax identification number. Let's just call it any identity that we can use for tax purposes. That's how we develop tax ID, tax identification. Ultimately, the objective is, if you're an individual, a natural person, we will focus on your NIN. Once we have your NIN, you don't need anything. We use it for your tax identification. In fact, we're hoping that we get to a point where if we know your phone number, because your phone numbers are unique. If I know your phone number, that's good enough. Now, for businesses, we want to get to a point where we use their RC number, okay, with Corporate Affairs Commission, because that's also unique to them. Once we do that, we're able to harmonize all the tax identities in Nigeria to a single platform that will identify you uniquely, so that life is easy for you if you are moving around, doing business in different places, buying assets in different places, and your record is harmonized. It would also help us to know if you are deceiving government about your income. because the intelligence will link everything together. There are people who will file their tax returns and say life is hard. The whole year that they made only 2 million naira. And you see from your payment card alone, just going to malls and going to restaurants on weekend, they've spent 4 million. You say, Oga, can you please explain to us, how did you find the money to spend on your card when you only earn 2 million? And it's not impossible. We just wanted to explain. It could be that it was a gift, right? If it's a gift, okay, thank you for explaining. Say the person that gave the gift, did they declare that amount as part of their income? Because somebody needs to declare it unless they are printing naira, right? So that intelligence system is the way every country that is aspiration, that the one we want to be like, that's how they determine who is truly poor and they're exempted from tax. And they know who are not so poor and ask them to pay their fair share. Under this our new tax law, if you run a small business and your annual turnover is 100 million naira or less, your corporate income tax is 0%. You won't pay corporate income tax. Now, some people said, are you not sure that all the companies in Nigeria will just be small business now? He said, that's okay. People will want, there's a temptation to lie, to gain an undue advantage. We will find out. Because every time you sell to someone, your objective is the direct objective of your buyer. If I sell this mobile phone to you, and I don't want to pay tax, and I sell it to you for 100,000, my objective is not to report it to government at all. Or if I'm feeling a little bit guilty, I want to report it as like 20,000. Okay? So I don't pay tax. You that you bought it from me, your objective is, I must report 100,000, maybe even overstate it, so that I can get deduction, so I don't pay too much tax. The same thing with import. If you import it, you want to under-declare, so you don't pay import duty. When you go to revenue service, you want to over-declare, so you don't pay corporate tax. In every system, when you sell, there must be at least two parties. The buyer and the seller have equal and opposite interests. What the new system we are building will do is it will trigger a flag between the buyer and the seller. If the number they report is not equal and opposite, it will flag it as an area of risk. You will see the taxman come and audit you. If the two numbers are equal and opposite, even if you are both lying, but you lie equally, the system is fine. So, being dishonest under the new regime, we have consequences. If you bought an item that's supposed to be charged to VAT and there's no VAT, you'll be denied deduction of tax for that item 100%. We have designed the system to be rewarding doing the right thing, unlike what we have currently. Let me give you one other example. We have a lot of tax consultants, maybe even tens of thousands of tax consultants, lawyers, accountants, tax practitioners, and that's what they do for a living. But guess what? The vast majority of them, far more than 90%, they are selling tax evasion for a living. You go to a company, their tax they're supposed to pay for the year is 10 million. You say, nobody pays 10 million now. You cook the books so that they can pay 1 million. You collect 2 million, pay a bribe to the taxman, keep the rest to yourself, and move on to the next client, and the next client, and the next client. How can the country be better like that? We know politicians have their own problems, but we have to solve this problem together. It's not one or the other. It has to be at the same time. We have now introduced a new rule. For you to represent anybody as a tax consultant, you must pass, number 1, competency tests. Number 2, integrity tests. And number 3, self-compliance. You cannot give what you don't have. You that you want to help other people comply, have you complied? And we'll be tracking everything you do on the system. When you fail on competency, when you fail on integrity, or you fail on you not complying, you have questions to answer. Depending on the gravity of your failure, you can be deaccredited. That's the end of your livelihood. You can find another job, but no longer in the tax system. I've done many trainings for professionals where I was telling them about ethics. And when I finish, they'll come to me and say, I have no idea what they're going through because I work for a big 4 accounting firm. Because I work for PwC. They said the brand was protecting me. I don't know how hard life is. And one of them said to me that he told his client that they should be honest and declare the right amount. The next day, he got a letter that he was fired. Before you could explain the firing, they had hired someone else who was willing to play balls. The man then asked me, he said, I have family at home I must feed. I have staff I must pay their salary. How do I survive? I didn't have the answer myself, other than God will help you at some point. And I said, beyond God helping, maybe we can also help. Now we have built a system that will make sure that you earn a good living by being honest. And that will make sure that you do not earn a living by being dishonest. For once, let it count for something that people are honest in Nigeria. So the banking and tax ID thing means if you already have a TIN for your bank account that you use for business, you don't have to do anything, you are fine. If in your bank account you are not doing business, you're also fine, you don't need to do anything. But if you have a bank account you are using for business and you don't have a TIN, you have to get a TIN. If you're an individual, you go to Joint Tax Board. I'll share some of the materials and I'm sure they can share with you via your communication channels. You see the link to register. If you are a company that is registered with CAC, you go to FRS. From next year, FRS will become Nigerian Revenue Service, will be NRS, and you get a TIN from them. So it's actually not a hard thing to do. It's part of the way we want to get intelligence under the system. The next one is informal sector. So we have this very wrong notion that we have carried around for so long. A lot of it was given to us by the West. They'll come and tell you your tax revenue is in the informal sector. And so that's how we ended up chasing poor people around. In my committee, we did our analysis using data. We concluded otherwise. The money that we are looking for is not in the informal sector. In fact, we concluded that 97% of the informal sector, bottom 97%, should be legitimately exempted from all taxes. Let them just breathe. No VAT, no withholding tax, no income tax. Just live your life. The remaining 3% of the informal sector are the people who have capacity to pay. Some of those top 3%, they make more money than CEO of banks. We have the system to find out what they are making, even if they don't tell us. But let the vast majority of our citizens who are struggling to make ends meet have a breather. Then the final one is fuel surcharge. I said to you, I'll be honest with you. This fuel surcharge was not part of the proposals that we gave to Mr. President, that he gave to the National Assembly. But it came up in the course of the debate of the lawmakers. And there was an existing law, FEMA, Federal Road Maintenance Agency, since 2007, where they had this 5% surcharge on fuel that was meant to be dedicated to fixing roads, 40% to federal roads and 60% to state and local government roads. It was never collected because it was pointless. If government was subsidizing PMS and you put a surcharge on it, then government would still be the one to pay it. So they never implemented it. Now that subsidy is gone, the decision was made by the lawmakers to include it in the law. But we said it would be insensitive to impose that tax at this time. So we introduced a clause to say this tax will not take effect until such a time that the finance minister issues an order, not just an order, published in the official gazette so that nobody is hiding to do it. If you remember some levies like cybersecurity, you know it was enacted before. Somebody just woke up one day, managed to convince the CBN, and there was a crisis. We said we don't want that to happen again. Let's do things in orderly manner. Nobody can just come and introduce this one abruptly. By the way, FEMA was already thinking about how to start collecting it. So, when this, of course, somebody just speaks and said from first, the way people just make up things. The person said from 1st of January, you will pay this 5%. I said, as the person that they gave the privilege to lead this reform, I can't go to the public and say I'm not aware. So I said, I have to explain it. So I explained, I said, people started cursing and abusing. I said, whatever you do, I'll still tell you what it is. It doesn't mean that this thing will come into effect in 2026. Maybe it won't even come into effect in 5 years. Or maybe it will come into effect in 4 months. But it is there for a purpose. Some of us who travel across the world will see countries that are smaller than us have better roads. I traveled for more than 10 hours, 2 weekends, to go for a retreat with the Joint Revenue Board. About 6 hours to go, 5 hours to come back. It was a nightmare. Even this our Lekki Ajah road like this, we all see the state of the road, right? Many of us were happy when they said don't pay toll again. We're paying for it. In more than 150 countries around the world, between 20% to 80% of the pump price of petrol and diesel is government taxes dedicated to road infrastructure. The easiest thing is to say, no, they remove subsidy. Why can't they use that to fix it? If you look at the budget, the figure is not balancing. It hasn't balanced. The president said they have exceeded their revenue. Some people say, hey, why are they still borrowing? It's maths. If you plan to spend 10 million naira, that's your budget expenditure, and you were hoping that you raise 6 million naira, that's your budgeted revenue. Instead of raising 6 million, if you raise 8 million, you have exceeded your revenue budget. But it does not mean that you won't borrow, because remember your spending is still 10. It means that instead of borrowing 4, you will borrow 2 million, but you still have to borrow. Borrowing is not a bad thing. Nigerians have this negative attitude towards borrowing. Do you know that Dangote would never have been able to build a refinery in his lifetime if he did not borrow? When governments borrow, it helps the economy. Okay? The banks will earn interest. They will pay salary of staff. Staff will collect salary and go and pay personal income tax. They will buy goods and services and pay VAT. It goes back to the government. There are countries that are built on credit, and the number one in the world is the US. American economy is built on credit. The bottom 15 million people in America, 15 million, you heard me right, are collectively worth less than $10. So if you have $10 in your wallet, your pocket, or your bank account, you are richer than the bottom 15 million Americans because they live on credit. American government itself is owing more than $30 trillion in credit. I'm not encouraging borrowing. I'm saying the problem is not borrowing itself. It's the application of the borrowing. If you apply it well, it stimulates the economy. If you don't, you create burden for current and future generation. So if we can redirect our focus and energy, particularly for the elite class, towards proper application of borrowing, rather than complaining every time that government wants to borrow, I think it will make a huge difference. So those are some of the top issues of concern. As I wrap up, what do we expect from all of this? We expect businesses will benefit, their risk will be reduced, they will become more competitive to compete locally, regionally, and globally. Households and individuals will see a relief in terms of their tax burden. Small businesses will be able to thrive, and governments in the medium to long term would equally benefit. So there's that QR code you see there is a calculator we had to develop. Someone said, if you earn more than 800,000, you pay 20%. There's nothing like that. This calculator, if you go there, put the amount of salary you earn now, it will tell you the tax you are paying currently and the tax you will pay under the new law. And we gave some examples there just to clarify. You see, this one, you may not even see the content. This is just the current list of taxes and levies that Nigeria asks people to pay. This is even the official one. If you add the unofficial one, you need another 2 pages of the same condensed content. It doesn't make sense. So these are the taxes we are trying to compress into a single digit so that people can have breathing space. Our implementation is ongoing. We have the foundation phase where we're trying to make sure that we communicate, publish the Gazette, issue transitional guidelines, regulations, explanatory notes, town halls. You're going to be seeing a lot, some of it in our local languages. And then build capacity to implement. And while we implement, we also monitor and continue to ask for feedback because we know the work is not done. The analogy I like to give is a homeless person who came up with a 3D design of the home he wants to build. He can celebrate, he can say that's progress, but he's still homeless, right? He moves forward to build a solid foundation. That is progress. He can celebrate, but he's still homeless. Until he builds on it, then he has a home. For us, the 3D was the idea that we co-created with the Nigerian people to formulate these new policies. The tax laws are the foundation, but we are mindful that until we implement effectively, it all means nothing. So we are giving you a commitment that will be honest with the implementation, but we need you also to cooperate with us, collaborate, and give us feedback. In conclusion, we can build a prosperous Nigeria together. We believe better days are ahead of us because the worst is behind us, and I gave some of the data at the beginning. But we must stay on course as a country, not to reverse at this point, because we are closer now to the end of the sacrifice and the pain. We must see it through so we can benefit. And you must seek to understand. One thing I know now more than ever before is that if you want to do yourself a favor, never, ever run with newspaper headlines. Never. They are 99.99% misleading. Please just find the time to read the content. And then if you can get the information directly yourself, please do. Because they seem to have a different objective as to why they write, which could be anything but to inform you. And finally, you must position yourself to benefit. Like I said, if you run a small business and you're not aware of some of the things I've said today, you wouldn't know. The taxman will still come and harass you, you still pay and beg. When you're supposed to just confidently say, what are you doing here? You know, keep records. I encourage small businesses, for example, to just use payment card, POS. You know, if you try and do that, because if you can't keep a proper record, it means when you print out your bank statement, you can see those things. When you are giving somebody money, just find the effort to put description, right? Don't just say Emeka 5 million naira, okay? Say Emeka for diesel. And your spelling does not even need to be correct. It's just something you can remember. Because when you don't have evidence, you won't benefit, right? And I'm not saying you should go and hire an accountant. Not everybody can afford them. But you can do something that is practical in your own little way. Do you know for more than 15 years, my drivers know, when we drive to a fuel station, if you are not using POS, the question is, do you have receipts? If you use POS, it prints out for you. That thing will fade and become blank later, right? Quickly take it on your phone or do whatever you can, but keep record. It will make magic for you under the new system. It will save you a lot of money and stress. Remember, at the end of the day, a rising tide lifts all boats. If Nigeria works, all of us will succeed. And may God help us. Thank you very much. So if you want to download deceive you. Even if you don't like the information, we'll be honest with you. So we are on WhatsApp, we have a website, we're on social media, even TikTok. Because we thought that the teenagers were not following us, so we said let's open TikTok. So please feel free to follow us. Thank you once again.